When delving into the depths of the underground, there are infinite realms of sound. These artists exist outside of mainstream culture, reject mass media commercialization, and pursue authenticity in their endeavors by any means. For Zoe DeWitt, this meant comprising an album entirely made from human skulls and bones as instruments. Today we explore the story behind the elusive ritual ambient project 0, and the enigmatic 1984 album, The Secret Eye of L.A.H. In 1962, Zoe DeWitt was born Michael Sperlhofer in Vienna, Austria. During her upbringing, she would be introduced to the realm of experimental music and the esoteric arts. Specifically, Zoe was deeply intrigued by the works of English occult artist Osman Spare and the French avant performance artist Antonin Artaud. Spare incorporated strong symbolism, sigils, and sexual imagery into his work, in addition to developing occult theories on the relationship between the conscious and unconscious self. Artaud developed philosophy against established theater, seeking to rid the emphasis on plot and language, returning the medium back to a raw and emotional form. This culminated into his work, Theater of Cruelty, which shattered these traditions and replaced them with unbridled emotion, sensation, intense bodily experiences, screams, ritualistic elements of expression, and analyzing the paradigm of life as unrelenting or even violent. These same concepts were integral to Zoe's creative philosophy, and can be seen as a direct parallel with the industrial and post-industrial scenes of the mid-70s and 80s. Where bands like Throbbing Gristle would use their history in performing arts to evoke shock within their audiences, complementing their uncompromising, bleak, and sometimes disturbing sound. At the age of 19, Zoe would write a small book influenced by Artaud, printed by a Viennese publisher who introduced her to an underground network based around postal exchange. This same network also happened to be tightly connected with the subculture of industrial music. In the early 80s, Zoe would study electroacoustic music at the University of Music and Performing Arts Vienna. Influenced by industrial contemporaries like SPK and Nocturnal Emissions, she would release her first venture into the realm of music, with Korpses' Katatonik, producing nearly 200 copies of her album on tape via her newly created label, Nekrophile Rekords. Venturing through Zoe's concept, she based the album around millions of dead remote-controlled humanoids having succumbed to totalitarian political control, as death, mental and physical psychic disorders plague humanity. Now involved in the underground industrial network, she would connect with Genesis P-Orridge of Throbbing Gristle, with the goal of releasing What's History, a recording done by P-Orridge and Stan Bingo, a roadie for Throbbing Gristle, the track being sparsely distributed through the underground network. Zoe had thoughts of this being the hopeful second release for Nekrophile Records. To her surprise, P-Orridge agreed, noting that the song wasn't actually done by Throbbing Gristle, but composed as something new. This recording later would function as a blueprint for the sounds of Psychic TV, who after the breakup of Throbbing Gristle would mark the era of transcendence between industrial and post-industrial. Psychic TV would go on to release 23 Tibetan human thigh bones, a track recorded with Tibetan bone instruments that were supposedly made from monks, virgins, and executed criminals. Based on the track, Zoe would arrive on an idea to create a variety of instruments from human bones and skulls as means to produce her next album. But achieving this posed an issue. How could one attain human remains so freely? A friend within her circle would then reveal the location of an unlocked charnel house, or vault, which bones and corpses were stored, within a small village in Lower Austria. After arriving, she would fill 2 large travel bags with 9 skulls and a large number of other bones, unpacking the remains of dozens of deceased human beings into her flat. Zoe inspected the bones, which were not prepared and bleached, such as those you would find in an anatomical collection, but dark, worn, brown and green spotted, with some of the skulls having hair still remaining on their surface. This produced a very wretched smell which was hard to bear, spurring internal turmoil on the ethical principles of the act. As what was done had been done, she began to work on crafting an assortment of these unconventional instruments. She sawed off the hip joints and drilled the knee joints of thigh bones, making a makeshift trumpet, which followed the Tibetan example from Psychic TV. Sawing the skull caps, she would cover them in sheepskin, forging skull drums. From a shank bone, she would fashion a flute, and by attaching the mouthpiece of an oboe to a thigh bone combined with an L, she created additional wind instruments. Carving an elongated bone with multiple scores would serve as a guiro, filling the remaining skullcaps with finger bones to function as rattles. Arranging a row of thigh bones which varied in length on a wooden box to create a crude xylophone. Now looking at the array of human instruments, select pieces would adorn serpent skin, metal, and paint. The recording process would then begin, attempting to navigate arrangements from her macabre creations. With the assistance of a 4-track cassette recorder and mixing desk, as well as a Revox tape machine, Zoe would create loops and analog echo effects. By adjusting the speed settings, she could augment the sound of dry bones to attain a deeper resonance. When creating rhythm, she would cycle through a section 2 or 3 times, then loop. To her surprise, the primitive instruments worked quite well, sounding very similar to the meditative ritualistic music she was inspired by. After less than 3 weeks, she had achieved enough recording material for a cassette, titled The Secret Eye of L.A.H. The name was chosen by profound symbolism, connected to her through the occult group the Temple of Psychic Youth, founded by Genesis P-Orridge. The group operated as an order of ceremonial and sex magic, as well as being an experimental art collective. Members were encouraged to make magical sigils, crafting them on the 23rd hour of the 23rd day of each month. If an individual chose to do so, they were invited to mail their sigils to a central location where the magical energy in them could be used to enhance others in the collective. The psychic cross was a symbol frequently used by the organization and associated with psychic TV. Upon joining, members would be bestowed with the name Kali for female and Eden for male, combined with a number. Zoe received the name Eden 77, which she had a deep spiritual tie to. 77's numerology being attached to the Arabic word and forename L.A.H, meaning night, and the Hebrew word os, which meant a he-goat, a symbol which to her represented the unrestrained creative force of nature. This idea transpired into the creation of the 0, logo, which was crafted out of pictograms for an eye and a sword. It was around this symbolism that she originated the whole theme of the album, referring to the cosmic unity of opposite forces within nature: night, death and dissolution into nothingness, and the unrestrained sexual force of creation. This counterbalance presented itself as a foundational principle. The acronym L.A.H was created from Love Always Yieldeth and Love Always Hardeneth, cited from Aleister Crowley's Book of Lies. She even planned the recording time and window based around the numerology in 77, self-admittedly stating this act as neurotic, but justified, in regards to her occult beliefs. To Zoe, the recording also functioned as an alchemical act, the cruelty of death being transformed into an immaterial manifestation of beauty in the form of music. The Secret Eye of L.A.H is a driving post-industrial and dark ambient offering. Primitive and tribal, the listener is placed in a subterranean atmosphere, sparking curiosity for the prospect of each coming passage. Driving onward, each offering showcases a minimal and ominous progression. Although draped in esoteric, ritualistic, and darker themes, the album for me evokes a sense of calm. Its rhythm sections feel almost meditative, the percussion crafted from human remains being at its forefront. Following the release of L.A.H, Zoe would be asked to perform in Amsterdam and Arnhem, the Netherlands. There she would engage in performing BDSM acts and dousing herself in animal blood, inspired by Viennese actionism, who upheld the practices and philosophy of Artaud's theater of cruelty. 0, would have a single song release in the oncoming year. Appearing on The Archangels of Sex Rule the Destruction of the Regime, a compilation released on Nekrophile Rekords. After this release, a creeping feeling dawned on Zoe that 0, didn't make much sense anymore. She was unable to create anything she saw as sublime as L.A.H, condemned to repeat and copy herself. After arriving at this conclusion, she decided to stop making music altogether. In 1990, she gave most of the instruments from L.A.H away, keeping only 2, sold all master tapes, and even the name Nekrophile. She then began retracting herself from the occult ideologies of Aleister Crowley and chaos magic, developing and adapting her own theories on the unconscious mind, building from concepts set forth by Austin Spare as one of her earliest inspirations. During this period, she would find her home in the arts, active in book publishing, lectures, exhibitions, and the production of fine art. These years of reclusiveness allowed for a mysterious veil to surround Zero, the internet attempting to connect and trace all the lines and links to Zoe's identity. This also opened the door to communicating with Zoe herself, as multiple labels would go on to release some of her old records, previously unreleased songs, live recordings, and even a tribute album. Nearly 40 years after L.A.H.L.A.'s release, Zoe would perform under Zero, at TVI New York City in 2022, her third ever live performance under the name. In October of 2024, Zero, would release their first record of new material in decades, titled What is a Body? Originally, What is a Body was a 50-minute background soundtrack for Zoe's lecture performance in the Anatomical Theater of the Academy of Fine Arts, Vienna. During the performance, she lay motionless on a marble autopsy table in the center of the theater, video projections showing macro shots of body landscapes, blended with dance movements in slow motion, reciting and exploring philosophical conceptions of the body. The recording, based on rearranged samples from L.A.H.L.A., takes you to the same depths: dark, ritualistic music with transcendent drones and a tribal origination. Ultimately, the Secret Eye of L.A.H.L.A. is an example of what reputation can do for an artist's legacy when promotion is not at the forefront of your success. Flourishing in the post-industrial underground, Zoe encapsulates it best, stating, "As can be seen, the seeds I planted with Zero, still continue to bear strange fruits. And even if it was not always easy for me to mention the project in my biography, Zero, could not be thought away from my life and has now become a vital part of my artistic identity." If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and drop me a comment on your thoughts. What do you think of Zero, and the approach of using human remains as instruments? On this channel, we explore the darker sides of music and art, dropping a video every Wednesday. With that, I hope to see you again soon. You think those villagers in Austria were mad that their relatives were kidnapped?